They still talk about the nights when the river hums in Hollow's Bend. The old fishermen say it's the wind. The teenagers say it's a prank. But the mothers especially, the older ones, keep their curtains drawn and pray softly when it begins. The first time Eleanor Price heard it, she thought it was a trick of the current. She had arrived from the city with her camera, her notebooks, and a stubborn streak of disbelief. She'd read about the river wives online, buried in an old newspaper archive that few bothered to visit. It described disappearances stretching back over a century. Always newly married women, always taken in the same way, gone without a struggle. Their footprints leading down to the riverbank, and then nothing. The police had stopped investigating long ago. Hollow's Bend preferred to let its dead keep their secrets, but Eleanor wasn't from Hollow's Bend. She didn't understand that the town wasn't built next to the river, it was built around it, as if the people had been orbiting something they couldn't control. On her first night, she stayed at a rundown motel with wallpaper that smelled faintly of mildew and history. The owner, an old man named Harold, gave her the key without eye contact and said, "If you're here about the wives, best not to look too hard. The river don't like attention." She laughed it off, told him she didn't believe in ghost stories, but Harold didn't smile. "You will," he said. "Everyone does." The next morning, Eleanor began her research at the town library, a small, crooked building that seemed to sag under its own memories. The librarian, a soft-spoken woman named Ruth, looked nervous when Eleanor asked about the river wives. "People drown," she whispered, glancing around as if the books might be listening. "Sometimes they come back." Eleanor pressed her for details, but Ruth simply closed the record book and handed her a map of the river's path. The handwriting in the margins was uneven, old, and barely legible, but one phrase kept appearing beside different locations. She called him home. That night, Eleanor walked down to the riverbank with her recorder and camera, just to capture some ambient sound for her article. The water reflected the moon in broken, trembling lines. Something about it felt alive. She clicked the recorder on and waited. At first, all she heard was the steady hum of crickets and the rustle of trees. Then came a voice so faint she thought it was the wind. "Sam," it whispered. "Sam, come back." The name wasn't hers. She froze, every instinct screaming that she wasn't alone. The water rippled without wind. Then the recorder picked up something that wasn't human, low, harmonic vibration, like multiple voices humming at once. Underwater. She fled back to her car, shaking. Later, when she replayed the recording in her motel room, she realized something even stranger. Her name echoed faintly in the background, as if the river had learned it between breaths. By the third day, she was seeing faces where there shouldn't have been any reflections in puddles. Silhouettes behind fogged glass, shadows under the bridge that moved against the current. The townspeople avoided her now. Conversations stopped when she entered the diner. Even Harold, the motel owner, refused to take her money, muttering, "You'll pay another way." She began to dig into the town's marriage records. Every missing woman had been married by the same man, a pastor named Elias Grange, who drowned himself in the river in 1948. His church had been abandoned ever since, left to rot near the northern bend where the current ran deepest. That evening, she walked there as the sun bled out across the water. The church stood crooked and dark, its bell tower half collapsed. Inside, pews were overturned, and a strange mold patterned the walls in shapes that looked like grasping hands. On the altar lay a single item, a soaked Bible, its pages fused together by damp. She reached out, and the air temperature dropped instantly. The humming began again, louder this time, and a soft mist coiled up from the floorboards. "You shouldn't have come," a woman's voice said behind her. Eleanor spun around, but there was only the open doorway and the sound of water lapping against the steps. She stumbled backward, nearly slipping, and realized the floorboards were slick with fresh river water. She fled the church and didn't stop running until she saw the motel lights in the distance. When she looked down, her shoes were wet, not just the soles, but soaked through, as if she had stepped directly into the river. That night, Eleanor woke to the sound of dripping. It wasn't raining. The ceiling was dry, but when she turned on her lamp, she saw a trail of wet footprints leading from the door to her bed. A recorder, which she'd left on the table, was running on its own. Through the static came that same voice. "Come home." Then another voice joined Itaman's this time, trembling, pleading. "I tried," he said. "I couldn't save you." Eleanor realized with a shock that it was Samuel Kettering, the last husband of the most recent missing woman. She found his address in her notes and drove there before dawn. The man who opened the door looked hollowed out, like someone who hadn't slept in years. When she told him what she'd heard, he slammed the door and whispered through the crack, "She's in the water. She calls to everyone, eventually. It's not love she wants, it's company." Then, softer, "Don't answer her. Whatever you do." That night, Eleanor sat in her car by the riverbank, too tired to think clearly, her recorder in hand. She played back the previous night's audio again, and the voice seemed closer, more insistent. "Eleanor." It said no. "Eleanor. I'm so cold." She felt the air shift, the faint scent of lilies and rot. The surface of the river shimmered, and something white rose from beneath the face, bloated yet familiar. Eyes open and unblinking. Eleanor screamed and stumbled backward, but the face dissolved into ripples. When she blinked, the water was calm again, as if mocking her. She realized then that the stories weren't about women being taken, they were about them returning, again and again, until the river decided to keep someone new. The next morning, her car was gone, her recorder missing. No one remembered her checking into the motel. Harold swore he'd never seen her before. Her belongings were neatly stacked by the river, untouched. Only one clue remained, a wedding ring resting on the bridge railing, still dripping wet. Weeks later, tourists claimed to hear a woman's voice on quiet nights, whispering from beneath the water. Locals warned them not to answer, not to look too long into the current, because once the river knows your name, it doesn't forget. They say the hum you hear isn't the water, it's breath, echoing through centuries of grief. And sometimes when the mist is thick and the moon is low, you can see her standing on the bridge, notebook in hand, face turned toward the current, as if listening for her own story being told by the ones before her. The river wives never stopped taking, they just changed their face. Maybe they were never victims at all. Maybe they were the river itself, jealous, hungry, endless. So if you ever find yourself in Hollow's Bend, and the night seems to still, and the water hums your name, don't listen. Keep walking, because she's still there, waiting for someone to finish her story. And maybe that someone, he's you. If this tale has found you near midnight, and the sound of running water suddenly feels heavier than it should, maybe don't sleep yet. Another story waits one, whispered through cracked mirrors and old recordings. If you dare, stay close, and let the next voice call your name. Because the next story, it's not about the river. It's about what watches you from the reflection on the other side.